without sales, the company doesn't exist. And without marketing, people don't know the company exists.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch, we'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, the link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Welcome back. This week, we're taking a look at where price fits into the marketing mix, the 7 Ps. But first, let's meet Vicki O'Neill. Vicki is helping companies bridge the gap between marketing and sales, and she has the experience needed to achieve this, believe me. Vicki also hosts a podcast, Connect the Dots, tackling and talking through those important areas where sales and marketing could and should be working in harmony, as this increases employee satisfaction, customer engagement, and business results. And who doesn't want all of that? But first, I wanted to ask Vicki, who is your favourite double act?
It is Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Do you know who they are?
No. Explain.
They are female comedians who got their start on Saturday Night Live, and they've hosted the Golden Globe Awards, and they've appeared in movies. And their most recent movie that they appeared in is Wine Country, which was just released, I think, just on Netflix, maybe.
Okay.
But they are hilarious, and they do a great job of playing off each other.
Yeah.
So and I love the fact that they're women who are comedians.
Okay, brilliant. Love that.
Yeah.
Netflix is taking over the world, aren't they, basically?
It is. They got a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I'm listening to a podcast, actually, it was Netflix versus Blockbuster. Really interesting.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
It's a multi-episode podcast?
Yeah, so it's called Business Wars.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. So it is what it says on the tin, basically. They take two rival companies and they go through the history of their rivalry, basically, and how one is above another and how they counteract that and all kinds of stuff. So they've done Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to have to go out and check that one out.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. So let's get into this. What's the story that's brought you to this stage of your career as founder of KenK Marketing?
Well, in 2011, I was receiving requests for side projects like web designs and logos and just little projects here and there. And people were asking for marketing advice. And at the time, I was actually in a marketing role. And I enjoyed doing that type of work. So it kind of planted the seed in my mind that at some point I really would like to start my own business and keep focus on my own business. So in 2011 is when I actually launched KenK Marketing. And all of my professional life, it's been in the corporate world, but in just different positions, whether they were marketing positions or sales positions. I've always kind of had this entrepreneurial side and I fit into the roles that I was in, but always wanted to do something different. But when you're in a corporate environment, a lot of times you're restricted by the role that you've been given, and you just kind of have to roll with it. So they didn't really allow for the growth and creativity that I was craving. So I kind of set a goal for myself that I was going to eventually get into a full-time position with my job or with my company. So after a series of corporate jobs, going on my own in 2015 for 2 years, and then I went back to a corporate job because someone had recruited me, and it was like a job I just couldn't turn down. And then that job got dissolved in February of last year, along with the entire department eventually. So I was like, you know what? I think this is a sign I just need to stay focused on K marketing. So last March, I decided I'm going full force and I'm not looking back. So
Excellent.
that's where I'm at.
That's great stuff. So can you just explain what K marketing does, or I suppose what you do?
Yes. So K Marketing helps small and mid-sized businesses connect the dots between marketing and sales and the business objectives. We work with companies that have one person doing all marketing and sales efforts, companies with one person dedicated to both marketing and sales, and companies with completely separate marketing and sales departments where you have a leader in each role. And any of those that need marketing and sales strategies to drive business or need to reverse engineer their efforts by starting with their business objectives and then developing backwards. So different types of needs and different types of companies, but we work with all of them.
Okay, cool. I noticed you started that by saying that essentially what you do is help companies join the dots,
Yes.
or connect the dots, should I say.
Yes.
So do you just want to describe why you mentioned connect the dots?
Well, it's also the name of my podcast.
Wow.
But it's funny. It actually has been part of different conversations from other people, not intentionally mentioning it because it's the name of my podcast, but I think it's just a natural fit for people to have that comment when they're talking about marketing and sales, because essentially you are connecting the dots between the two. And that was the reason why I named my podcast that.
Absolutely. Great podcast. And you get some fantastic guests on there. Absolutely amazing guests.
A really good one coming up soon.
Yeah. You'll have to excuse the pun, connect the dots if anyone's listening on who's coming up on that podcast. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Why is it so important that sales and marketing get along?
Well, without sales, the company doesn't exist. And without marketing, people don't know the company exists. So by getting along and working together cohesively, it makes achieving brand awareness and sales much easier. So if they are getting along and working together towards a common objective, then everything works a lot easier.
And do you find that when you go into companies, sometimes or in general, you help them because they're working in silos?
Yes, that is a lot of times what's happening is that marketing departments or the marketing person has their own set of objectives, and then the sales department or salesperson has their own set of objectives. And if you think of the psychology of those two types of people, they're completely different. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that they would have separate agendas, but really when those two come together, it's a powerhouse. So it just makes sense when they can understand the overall objective and why they should be working together, then it kind of clicks and they have that, okay, let's do this. But until they can understand why, it becomes a challenge. So I just help them understand why they should be working together.
Okay, so when you've done that, sales needs to help marketing, marketing needs to help sales. They all need to get along and play happy families. How can each one do that and vice versa?
I actually wrote blog posts on this.
Okay, cool.
It was something that I felt was important. That's one of the reasons why there's a gap, is that marketing doesn't really understand sales, what they do, why they do what they do, and then vice versa. So I wrote blog posts with that intention of, going down to as simple as marketing understanding the terms that sales uses. They're completely separate. There's some that are the same. And then sales understanding some of the terms that marketing uses. But marketing directly can help sales by, gaining insight into what triggers customers to buy. So that could be listening to phone calls. If they have an outside sales force, they can ride along with sales reps, as long as it doesn't incur too much expense on the company. They can ghostwrite blog content for the sales rep. And then they can work together on creating what qualifies as a good lead. So, and sales then can, on the opposite, can help by providing feedback on the content that they're receiving from marketing. Provide feedback in regards to whether or not it's, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. The more honest the feedback, the more likely they are going to make those changes and make the changes more relevant to what they actually need. Sales should share the biggest obstacles or objections that they're receiving from their prospects and customers. And when they understand that, then they're more likely to modify their content and their initiatives to be more focused on getting more conversations with the salespeople. And then, of course, working together on what qualifies as a good lead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Buckets.
Crucial. One thing you touched upon just before is that with sales and marketing departments, they invariably have different goals, different agendas. Is it actually possible to align these? And what's the benefit of doing that?
It is possible to align these. Companies have done this, and they are currently doing this. Results across the board prove that when they are aligned, they operate more efficiently. They have better customer retention. They have higher revenue, higher profits. There's nothing bad that I've seen that results from marketing and sales departments aligning. The question comes down to is, do companies and department leaders want to align? So a lot of times, even if you have a one person doing marketing and sales, then they might just be overwhelmed and don't have the time to even think through the process. If you have one person doing each, it's probably more likely to happen because that's, they probably work with each other so much anyway that it just makes sense to just go ahead and do that. They're probably already doing it anyway. But it really comes down to when the departments, and you have department heads, then it becomes more of letting go of maybe some of that control that they have, and taking that first step into creating communication, which is really the basis of creating alignment. So I actually created a 10-step system that helps companies align their departments and align marketing and sales initiatives. The very first step is communication. And a lot of times that's just not there.
And I've always found it amazing that we always speak about external communication. Internal communication is so vital. And when you're having to fight and battle internally, your focus is just not on what it should be, the customer. And so that first step that you just highlighted, massively important.
Yes, exactly. I think when you have the internal communication, not just between marketing and sales, but really between all departments, because marketing and sales ultimately involves customer service, and it involves accounting and finance, and it involves the company leaders or stakeholders. Those two departments impact the entire company. And when those two are aligned, then you will see a lot more cohesiveness across the company. And when you have internal cohesiveness and communication that's working, then you'll see that automatically reflect externally to the customers.
Okay, so speaking of customers then, at this moment in time, we've got a massively fragmented marketplace in terms of communications, the channels, where people are, their needs, their wants, their desires. What are the benefits of actually mapping a customer journey?
There are lots of benefits, but it can become overwhelming very quickly. So like fingerprints, no two customer journeys are alike.
Yeah.
So if you and I are looking for the exact same solution, how we get there is going to be completely different. So it's going to be that way with every person. So I think that's where companies a lot of times get caught up in thinking, I can't possibly come up with an infinite number of scenarios. So the best way to do that is to map out for the majority. So if you look at a curve of data, you've got that 80% in the middle, the average, the median, map to that percentage of your customer's journey. And then eventually you'll go ahead and automatically capture those other ones as a result of that. So when you can do that, and you get marketing and sales in the entire process, because there are so many different points along the customer journey. Starting from the beginning, it could be just educating somebody on your brand. Maybe they don't know who you are. So that's marketing, but sales needs to understand what's being said so that as they go through that process and sales steps in, They're using the same verbiage and communication and messaging, and everything's consistent across the board.
It's a really interesting point, that, because what I usually find is that for uneducated or people that aren't within the marketing department, it's so easy to have one piece of communication and feel like it's going to do everything for you, rather than look at this journey and taking it one step at a time, one variable at a time, and get to know the customers and move them along.
Yes. And there's no one approach that's going to work for everyone. So you can't take, a template or take a cookie cutter approach to mapping it out.
Yeah.
But when you have your data and you've got your sales and you've got feedback, then you just need to spend time and invest in how can we map this out and make it make sense so that we can identify the different points at which somebody enters their journey and have the appropriate information in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. The problem with that is that everyone is very time precious. No one's got any time anymore, and if we have, we fill it with social, or we fill our time with a lot of rubbish that we don't necessarily need, which makes it even worse.
It does.
But along with that technology comes other technologies that can really help us out. How much of the sales and marketing function can be or should be automated, and what parts couldn't?
I'm going to go with a gray answer and say it depends.
Excellent. Moving on.
And next question. It really boils down to looking at what you are currently doing. So what's your current processes? What are you selling? Who are you selling to? Where are they spending time? And it even comes down to how much data do you have and how are people finding you? So there's so many different variables, but as we all know, there's a lot of conversation about AI, artificial intelligence, and that doing a lot of work for us. But artificial intelligence only works as good as the data you have. So the more historical data you have and the more consistent the data is, then the more likely it is that you can start automating some of your processes, especially from a marketing perspective. Sales, if you rely on e-commerce and baskets and all the sale actually taking place online without an actual sales team or salesperson, then that's completely different than if you've got a sales team that's actually customer facing and it's a longer sales cycle. That you're not going to be able to automate. That's going to still require a lot of human intervention and a lot of human interaction and a lot of human engagement. Mm-hmm. So that's why it depends on the type of business and what your sales process, your marketing to sales process is, whether or not you can automate and at what point you can automate.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Just moving back one step, we were talking about sales and marketing getting along and internal communication.
Mm-hmm.
What, in your opinion, are the internal benefits of working closer together?
I think working together creates trust. It creates better relationships between the internal teams. Transfer of information becomes easier. So if a marketing person partners with a salesperson, maybe that team has one way of transferring information between each other. Maybe it's through email. And then you may have another marketing person, another salesperson who are maybe more tech savvy and want to communicate through Slack. Or, so it just depends. But if you have that communication between the two and you work well together, then you can devise a system that you can transfer and communicate back and forth that works best for you. So it also helps with camaraderie, teamwork, and just overall, environment. If you're in an office environment or you do a lot of interaction online with your teams.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Oh, okay. I'm kidding. Yes, I'm ready.
You have me worried there. You've got it. Of course you've got it. Name one must-read business book.
I'm going to go with a recent book that I read and I absolutely love, and I hope more people find out about this, and it's Marketing Rebellion by Mark Schaefer. It is an absolute must-read for anybody who is in social media, marketing, business. It's absolutely, I've got so many lines and so many stars and asterisks, and I can't lend it out to anybody, but
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think you're the first person to mention it. Love it. I haven't read it. I've listened to it because that's how I digest my info and take it in. Not a fast reader, so it helps listening to. But absolutely amazing. But it all just kind of makes sense once you read it.
it does exactly.
What was the last thing you Googled?
Last thing I Googled was completely not work related, but something worth mentioning is that there were a bunch of tornadoes that came through Dayton, Ohio on Monday, so 2 days ago, and went through actually the neighborhood I grew up in.
Wow.
And pretty much destroyed it. So my sister and I went and picked up a bunch of water that we were delivering to one of the stations. So I was Googling Dayton, Ohio tornadoes, water drop off locations. I know I get really wordy with my searches.
Yeah.
It was the first search result and it worked. So
I wouldn't want to pick the keywords for you, to be perfectly honest, if I was targeting you.
Long tail. I'm long tail.
Massively. What's your most used app at the moment?
Canva. I love Canva. It's for everything, all my images on social media. Best app ever.
Excellent. Yeah, I love it. What is your favorite theory, concept, or methodology?
Ask, listen, learn.
What would be your one tip for people who are studying at the moment?
As you learn, understand along the way how you can apply what you're learning to the real world, your job, or whatever the reason is that you're studying. And if you're investing in you and educating yourself, keep in mind along the way how you can apply the information and help others. So I go with the acronym ABL, always be learning.
Fantastic. That's such a good tip, because being a tutor, it's one of those things where you want them to pass a qualification, but you know that it's the practicalities that they'll need after that. And it's just such a baseline, but you need to be learning all these little different tips and tricks for when you pass that qualification as well.
Yeah, everything changes so much that we have to stay on top of it. And if we're not continuously learning or continuously educating ourselves on what's new and what's changed, we're really going to fall behind quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, Vicki, if people want to find out more about you, get in touch with you, where should they go?
They can go to my website, VickiO'Neill.com, and that's VickiOneill.com.
Fantastic. Vicki, pleasure speaking to you about all things sales and marketing. And why can't we just all get along? It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I greatly appreciate you asking me to be on here.
And thanks once again, Vicki, for joining us on this edition of Marketing Study Lab. And now, as we know, I'm going to take you through some of the top takeaways that I got from that little chat with Vicki. The first one is one thing or one statement that she said that really stuck in my mind, that without sales, a company doesn't exist. But without marketing, people don't know the company exists. Just let that sink in for a minute. Now you understand why it's so important. We all just get along. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world if we did? Anyway, aligning both sales and marketing goals has a whole host of benefits. These are better customer retention, better revenue, better profits, and a better atmosphere internally. And again, just getting along. And why wouldn't we all want that? Funny that, 2 takeaways ending in the same thought. And finally, automation. Now, automation can be a great way to speed up a process or create efficiencies, but only under the right circumstances. For example, AI will only ever be as good as the data that precedes it, which should be thorough and detailed. Well, for now. I think we've all seen the errors that can occur when AI doesn't have the right data, and it's not good. top tip as we take a wander through the 7 P's of marketing, the marketing mix. And this week, we're talking all about price. Now, I don't think I have to shove it down your throat how important price is within a marketing mix, or price is just in general. But the connotations of setting this can be varied. The price will have a detrimental effect on how people view a product or a service, and it has the power to destroy a brand's positioning, as well as create its prestige. It's important when setting a price that you consider if it's a right fit for not only the product or the service itself, as well as the company. After all, the company needs to make money. But has this price been set at the right level from the customer's point of view, your target market? Set it too high and they won't be able to afford it or see the value in buying something at such a high price. Set it too low and the product or service may be perceived as not having enough value. For example, seen as cheap. In addition to this, the pricing structure is also important and something you can't forget. So you need to consider whether it will be subscription-based, a one-off payment, or an annual payment perhaps. All these little connotations together provide you with a robust and solid price within the marketing mix, and it's integral to every other element of the mix that we're going and have discussed. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.